Hi everyone, Jessica Morrison, Realtor with FC Tucker, back this time for another Indy Home Interviews where we talk with a new home builder, Fischer Homes, and Alyssa to break down a brand new community. So Alyssa, thank you for being brave and coming back on the show. How are you and what community are we talking about today?
I'm good, Jessica. Thank you for asking. We're going to be discussing the new community that Fisher Homes has releasing in Brighton, Knoll in Greenwood. I think it's going to be super exciting, and I'm excited to talk about it.
Yeah, when is it releasing?
It is going to be releasing on February 23rd for sales.
Okay. Are you taking pre-sale orders or, kind of first come like a lottery system or what's that?
Yeah, it's going to be a lottery system. So February 23rd is a Friday. The Tuesday before is when we're going to do our sign up process for the lottery, essentially. And then, depending on what order you are in the sign up, is how we'll process them on Friday.
Okay. So if you're watching this and you're interested in building in Greenwood and you want to be first on the list, basically on the 23rd, you want to get your name in as soon as possible to have, and what's the objective for being first come on that sign up sheet?
Yeah, so um let's say we really before the 23rd would want to have pretty much everything solidified for the client, right? So we want to know what lot they want, what floor plan they want, and exactly how they would want it designed so that on the Tuesday before when we send everything in, all we have to do that Friday is just click submit and we're ready to go.
Okay. So let's talk about Brighton Knoll. What makes this community special?
So we haven't been, Fisher Homes hasn't been in Greenwood in a couple of years, which I think is really cool and exciting that we're finally back in the area again. Another thing that I think is really cool with this community is that it sounds weird. There's no HOA, but it's right next, or there is an HOA. There isn't like amenities, but there is a water park right next door, which is really cool.
Okay.
Um, we got a lot of hype with it when we were doing the community release a couple of years ago for the existing one that we have right next door. So it's really exciting, a really good feature to have right next door for people to go and enjoy the water park right there.
Okay. So when you say water park, does that include a pool or is it more like a splash pad?
A pool, yes, definitely. It's called Freedom Springs Aquatic Park, I believe.
Okay, great. And what's the other Fisher Homes community?
So the one that we're releasing is called Brighton Knoll. The one that is pre-existing that's been there for a couple of years is called Brighton Estates.
Okay, great.
Mhm.
So that's just helpful for those who are in Greenwood and kind of helping them understand where we're talking about. So some very preliminary questions. What kind of price point are we looking at? Does this community include basements? Um, how many floor plans are we looking at for options, ranch versus two story? So I'll cap the questions there.
Yeah, no, you're good. So, big picture, this community is going to feature two of our different collections. So, designer and then masterpiece. I'll start with designer. So, overall, this community is going to have 49 lots. 43 of those are going to be for the designer floor plans. Those, I want to say base price for those probably ranges or starts at least in like the 450s,
Okay.
somewhere around there. Those ones do not include basements, but we can add basements to those. And then the masterpiece floor plans, those base price are probably starting around 550. We're only doing six of them, but those do come included with basements.
Okay. Great. And what's the square footage range, like minimum to roughly maximum?
Yeah. Masterpiece is going to be a little bit higher. So on the designer side, the smallest is probably like 17, 1800, and then they can get on masterpiece end as high as 5 to 6,000 square feet.
Okay. And are the garages, is the most that you could build with one home a three car, or do you have four car options yet?
We're doing three cars in there. Yeah, the lots aren't going to be too wide for these homes to fit a four car, but yes, three car.
It's one of those questions I kind of knew already the answer, but you just never
Yeah.
know sometimes, especially with something like a masterpiece level. Sometimes
Yeah,
builders bringing out new floor plans and things like that. So,
sure. Yes.
Are there any, so with this new community release, you mentioned, I think 46 lots total, or 49, 43, and then six.
49, you got it. Yeah.
How many in the first section are you releasing?
We are doing all 49 at once.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah,
Yep.
because it's not a very big community, which is nice.
Exactly. And we've already kind of got it planned so we know where the model home is going to go, where the parking pad, and then we placed in a couple spec homes. So you take 49, suddenly we're at 45, right? So it's really just easier if we release it all at once because it's not too big of a community.
Sure. So
Yeah.
what's your current, say that we've got maybe somebody who's relocating from out of town or, a family who's trying to time the market with maybe the school season and things like that. What's your current build timeline? So if somebody in the next, well, I can't say week, but let's assume that somebody did their due diligence, sat down with myself and you and priced out a home and figured out what kind of finishes they wanted. And we're ready to go so that on February 23rd, we were ready to get earnest money deposited.
Yeah.
Um, what is your build process timeline? And maybe walk us through that whole build process with Fischer Homes.
Yeah, so in this instance, it's going to be a little bit different because it's a brand new community. The land there is actually unrecorded right now, so we have to wait for the land to be recorded. This is kind of like a pre-sale situation. We can't actually get record plots until I want to say April is what it was. From there, then we will start the build process and everything. I would probably estimate in this case with this community, like a 9 or 10 month kind of build time.
Okay.
What that looks like, kind of like what you said on the 23rd, if it happened that we were ready to move forward, we would do the initial earnest money deposit. They would go to the design center, get a pick out. They're all, their doors, their paint colors, their cabinets, countertops, that kind of fun stuff. And then throughout the build process, they would have a couple appointments with their field manager to actually go and visit the home on site and take a look at it while it's under construction, which is always really exciting.
Yeah. I definitely think that, just to reiterate, I think that at this point I'm a broken record, but you never know when someone's watching your videos, which ones they see or don't see. But, we always want to encourage you, whether you work with a realtor or not, really realtors are invaluable. And I'm trying to say that as much as I can from a third party perspective, but we really help you discern which floor plans are best for your family, best for resale, which upgrades are worth adding or, maybe waiting on for, something a little bit more economical. And then encouraging you to use independent home inspectors because while we try to make the best builder selection possible up front, we also are working with people and unfortunately people make mistakes or we get busy. And so it's just good to have that third party independent home inspection and not rely entirely on either the field manager or the city to make sure that everything's working because the last thing you want is to move in and have a two-story home, have a tub upstairs that when you go to use it for the first time, it floods. And that's just not fun. So, and that's I'm not saying that about Fischer Homes. It's just
Yeah.
part of the reality with new construction. So, is there anything that you feel is important for a buyer to know when evaluating either working with a realtor or considering new home construction?
Yeah. Customer satisfaction for Fisher Homes is like their number one thing. It's their biggest piece to this puzzle. So if that for a buyer means having a realtor and getting an inspection, if that makes them feel more comfortable, we are 100% on board because it makes our job easier, it makes their lives easier because they feel like they can breathe a little bit better knowing that their, home buying process is in good hands. So I think that's a really good point to make. But we love working with realtors. We love having home inspections done. So it, makes us feel good about the process as well.
Yeah.
Um,
Because
yeah,
then there's less drama after closing if there is a problem. And
exactly.
it's less expensive for you to fix as a builder because if we can catch something before the drywall and the insulation goes up, it's much cheaper and way less intrusive for you as a family than trying to work all around that. So
Yeah, of course.
out of the different communities that you are building in right now, what do you think really sets? I mean, I know you mentioned the water park, but is there anything really special about this community for Greenwood?
Let's think. So I don't know a ton of the specifics on the community yet, but I do know that most of these homes are going to require three-car garages. So for a lot of people that are wanting that extra storage space, you're more than likely going to have it in this neighborhood because most lots are going to be able to fit that, which is awesome. The water park, it's a really great area. I know there's just Greenwood is a very up and coming area. There's a lot of development going on down there. So I think, for very active families and, people that are trying to get involved in their communities, I think that's a really good piece as well. Um, yeah, this is also a um, two different selections of collections that we have in there, which isn't normal for a lot of our communities. So for them to be able to have all these different floor plans that they can pick from that they normally wouldn't is really great for the buyer to have these options. I think that's cool.
Sure. Now, you may not be able to answer this, especially because of what you mentioned with the land not being recorded yet. Um, so if you don't feel comfortable answering this, I understand.
Yeah.
Out of curiosity, do you feel from what you've seen in early discussions, the yards or specifically the backyards being deep enough to accommodate maybe a pool, like an in-ground pool situation?
Yeah. From what I've seen, I believe the cul-de-sac lots would be able to hold something like that. I don't know if the lots along the street that lead to the cul-de-sac would be able to hold something like that.
Okay.
I don't know the rough square footage of these lots, so it's hard for me to actually answer that. But I do think, just based off of looking at the maps that I've seen, I do think that the cul-de-sac ones could hold a pool if that was what somebody was interested in doing in their backyard.
Right. And then certainly provided if the HOA covenants allowed for
Mhm.
that. Sometimes they do,
Sure.
sometimes they don't.
Yes.
Um, do you know when those covenants would become available? Is that at the beginning of when they sign, or is that going to be sometime later?
I would guess before. Normally it's before actually signing because people want to know what they're signing up for, right? So I would guess hopefully within the next week or so, I will get that information.
Yeah, usually you get the production builders are good about having those covenants ahead of
Yeah.
time. I've seen some builders that are more smaller who shall not be named, and it's kind of like, well, like we're gonna have an HOA and we kind of have something, but it's not yet finalized. And it's like, okay. So,
Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
eventually it comes and you agree with everything that they've put forward. But yeah, so
Yeah.
again, usually with production builders, it's all done up front. So, do you know roughly what those HOA fees would be?
I believe it's 700 annually, so it's about $60 a month.
And what does that cover?
So for this community, there isn't like a ton going on in there. It would include like the walking paths. It would include the general upkeep of the community. There is a pond behind the masterpiece lot, so it would take care of that as well. But it's more so just like general upkeep and then being a part of Brighton Knoll is what that kind of entails.
Okay. I'm assuming that lawn maintenance for that price is not included.
It is not. You got that.
Usually that's like $100 a month. So
Yeah. Yeah.
very fun. Are there any floor plans out of this collection? That's the two collections that are offered that you're very excited about or you feel sell really well?
Yeah. So there's with each collection, there's going to be 10 floor plans. So you're going to have a total of 20 to pick from, which for some people is overwhelming, but in my eyes, how I see it is you know what you want. I can help you guys narrow it down, which is really easy. Um, in the designer collection, there is a floor plan that I really like. It's called the Wyatt. I think it's actually newer for us.
Okay.
Um, or one of our newer ones. I think it's super functional. I really like that style. It's a good. It's just a very functional space, I think, in my opinion. And then in the masterpiece collection, we have recently kind of revamped our masterpiece collection. So we've gotten rid of some old ones. and then brought in some new floor plans that are a little bit more modern, a little bit more functional. The Leland is one of those that I really like in there. And then one of the newer ones, it's called a Grayson. I don't know too much about it, but from what I've seen on the floor plan PDF and the photos, that one also I think looks really cool and it's new. So you would be one of the first people to get it, which is exciting.
That's always fun when you can be the first to get a new floor plan. Um,
Exactly.
okay. I was gonna try and share my screen, but I have a new computer and it's, oh man. Okay. Anyway, I'll figure that out later. So I'll certainly provide, I was going to try and share the floor plan links on my screen so those of you watching can kind of get a feel for it, but I'll include it down in the comments of this video so you can go take a tour. But I was just going to say, yeah, it's always fun when you can be one of the first to, because usually newer floor plans have um, kind of been the result of past floor plans being critiqued. And so if there's like, oh, I really wish like the hallway in from the garage into my like drop zone area or mudroom was a little bit wider, or, we really don't need this wall here. And so sometimes you benefit from those newer floor plans, and therefore it's more resale friendly because it's more modern. So it just depends on what you need as a family. Are there any floor plans, we've seen as an industry trend where we have the silent generation who is going to be at some point selling their homes, that time of ownership is certainly lengthening, which is adding to the stress of a lack of inventory because there used to be like 7 years is the average time for people to own a home, and now it's become 12. So if
Yeah.
you been trying to maybe move up. You want to sell your home and buy a new home, but you're not seeing a ton of options in the market. That's why is people are holding on to their homes longer, and interest rates have certainly played a part in that. But with the new build options, it can just be a good solution for with the silent generation aging, especially with how healthy a lot of people are now in their retirement phase or post-retirement. Families are considering upsizing so that an elderly relative or maybe a college student could move back in and have their own apartment or space. So are there any floor plans that you guys have added maybe to your offerings that kind of offer that type of solution?
Yeah, that's a really good question. A lot of our floor plans, you can have a guest suite on the main floor, but I do understand that that's not like enough space to have somebody kind of stay with you long term. So one thing that I think was really cool that they did add to the Masterpiece collection was kind of a new gen floor plan kind of style that fits kind of what you're talking about, like somebody moving in, staying with you long term, but them having their own space.
Mm-hmm.
That floor plan is in the Masterpiece collection and it's called the Pearson.
Okay.
I think it's super awesome. Essentially, what you can do on the main floor instead of the standard offering is change it so it gives somebody their own access from a third car garage into their space within the home. Gives
Mm-hmm.
them their own bedroom, bathroom, closet. They have their own living room as well, and then they have their own access to like a kitchenette, laundry rough-in, that kind of stuff. So you really can make it like a multi-generational living space within the home, which is really cool.
So a good follow-up question then is, are there any rental restrictions overall for the neighborhood? Or let's say somebody wanted to do like an Airbnb and build something like that in the Masterpiece collection. Are there any restrictions that you're aware of that would prevent someone from doing that?
Yeah. Um, I don't know the specifics on it just yet, but based on the communities that we have also recently released in different areas, I'm going to guess it's going to be based on those same kind of bylaws within the HOA that state you cannot do short-term rentals like HOA, or excuse me, HOA, Airbnb, VRBO, that kind of stuff, but you can do long-term rentals, that kind
Okay.
of, yeah.
All right. Well, again, that's speculation for those watching. So certainly read the covenants when they come out if that's something you're interested in exploring. I'm not surprised by that, but I think it's also interesting. So the city of Fishers allows you to have, my understanding is Airbnbs if it's part of your personal property. So I had a listing coming up. They chose to hold on to it and rent it out, which is really smart because they bought it forever ago. So they've got substantial amount of equity in it. I'm really happy for them. But when we were looking at sold comparables, there was another home in the neighborhood. Now, granted, it was updated, but they had modified the floor plan to be what you're talking about. So they had converted that front living room that you don't really use. It was kind of that two-stage floor plan where you've got the formal living and the family room, and they ended up converting that into a small apartment with its own access, and it sold for 100,000 more than
Wow.
any of the other homes in the area. And it wasn't that far in square footage, but it actually was in alignment with the city of Fishers for being able to be a short-term rental. So that's exciting. Is there anything else that you really want to brag on with this community, or any other floor plan features you think are important to highlight?
Not that I can think of off the top of my head, but I'm excited for this opportunity in an area that we haven't been in a really long time. And I think other people will be excited about that too.
Okay. Um, One quick question, kind of, I know pricing is specific to the floor plan. And so if you've got 1,700 square feet you're working with, that's going to be different than 3,000. But do you have a rough current, like 2024 price range for if someone was looking at adding a basement, what that would cost roughly?
You mean just like the price of adding the basement?
Unfinished.
Yeah. Yeah. If I had, you're right, it is going to depend on the square footage of the house because our basements will typically mimic the space on the main floor. So all of that will just be replicated in the basement. I'd say on average, depending on the floor plan, anywhere from like 30 to 50. And that would depend if you're doing, or depend on if you're doing like an 8 foot versus a 9 foot basement, that
Mm-hmm.
kind of stuff. And then you'd have all these other factors like finishing it, adding some rough-ins for wet bars, bathrooms, that kind of stuff.
Yep. As much as you can as a buyer, I always encourage people to highly consider, if they can, adding an unfinished basement, because you can always finish it later. And I know it's not a project some people want to sign up for, but when you go to resale, it's really, I mean, just in the last 7 years, Alyssa, I've been really surprised how many new construction listings have not had basements. And I know that's because the cost of concrete has been so high, labor, COVID, all those things. Um, and then you have different, areas like Lebanon, for example, has a high floodplain or
Yep.
high water table. So you're not going to want to put a basement if you're going to potentially have water in there all the time, which is
Yep.
understandable. But, and then the other big component of that is this, a lot of the cities are trying to make housing affordable and accessible. So if you require communities to have basements, then that, further removes some people from accessing that product. So, but when we look at move up buyers and trying to retain people in an area, can they find that move up housing that meets that next stage of life and lets them dream with the equity that they've built? So I'm excited to see that basements are offered here, especially because it's also Indiana and we're not exempt from tornado season. So
Yes, correct. We're not.
Okay, well, we've got a few minutes left here. Why should we consider building with Fischer Homes?
Yeah. Kind of like I said earlier, customer satisfaction is something that we take super seriously. So we are always going to be concerned about the buyer, the client. It's always our top priority to have their best interest in mind, which I think is really cool because we are a family-owned builder still. We're not, held by shareholders, which I think is a really important piece that helps with that customer satisfaction because we're able to do all of these different things to make the customer happy that all these bigger commercial builders aren't able to do. There's a lot of freedom that the buyer also has with our floor plans and, the customizations that they can do that I don't know that a lot of other builders allow. So I think that is also a piece that kind of drives people to build with us versus some other competitors.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, I think the privately owned family aspect is something that's um, I, I can't say that it's invaluable, but it is nice, I think, from just a communication standpoint, where if you have a challenge, there's, I think, a little bit more of a human touch involved. So, again, no production builder is perfect. So, not trying to put one builder up on a pedestal over another, but
Yeah.
I think that's just where it comes back to building relationships and making sure that you, as a buyer, work with an agent who has solid relationships, because when things, maybe don't go according to plan, and we, in a mutual partnership with the builder, and you know, we can't account for the weather, or like we can't control the weather. So that can impact construction delays and therefore maybe your move-in timeline. But the more you have a solid relationship with your agent, that agent has a good relationship with the builder, you as a buyer will have a better experience, because communication's one of the biggest complaints for whether it's a transaction in real estate or marriage problems. Over communication is always a good thing. So, um, what about tips for coming into spring of 2024? What are your predictions with new construction?
From what I have seen, that's always a really popular time. Um, I've also been recently talking to the loan officers that I work closely with, and they have been saying that just, their projections from what other people are saying, from what they've read and kind of research, is that rates are slowly coming down. So spring, I think, is going to be a really hot time, which is a good thing and a bad thing, right? A good thing because, you're going to have all these other houses come on the market. You're going to have a lot of opportunity, but I think it might be a bad thing because you're going to have a lot more competition that you're up against. You might be outbid on some stuff, but
Yep.
overall, I think it's going to be a really good time for people to kind of be able to get into the market and find what they're looking for.
Sure. Now, over the last year, because the market did slow down a little bit, and 8% interest rates are not something most people can swallow, understandably. So a lot of builders were offering incentives, loan programs to make financing more accessible. Is Fischer Homes offering any incentives right now? And if so, what do those look like?
We are, yeah, not necessarily. I don't know what they're going to be for Greenwood just yet, but for other communities, they are. They're doing rate buy downs. They're doing money on closing costs, money towards the purchase price of the house. So it's really, again, it comes down to that customer satisfaction thing. It is all how the buyer wants to save. So we let the buyer pick how they want to save their money. Do they want to use it towards the overall price of the house, or do they want to use it to buy down the interest rate to lower their monthly payment? That's kind of what Fischer Homes is doing right now.
Okay. My encouragement to you as a buyer, if you're thinking of moving or would like to build, and maybe, and this is actually a really good question. So, for a while during COVID, contingencies for a seller to sell their home and build a new home went away. And then I've seen some return where if a seller has a home to sell, they can go ahead and proceed towards building. And then within the last 90 days, they need to get their home under contract and so forth. What does that process look like right now with Fisher Homes?
Yeah, we do allow contingencies. So again, I think it's another one of those pieces. We want to make it as easy for the buyer as possible. So what we would do is we would write it in the contract that we are contingent on the sale of the current home. And then Fisher Home specifically requires the buyer to sell and close on their home with either within 120 days of writing the contract or drywall on the new house, whichever comes first. It's usually the 120 days, especially in the case with a new community like this. Find like a short-term housing situation, live with family, pick up a rental somewhere, And then your home is ready, you've got the funds to close on it, and then you're good to go with the brand new house.
Okay. So if I'm hearing you correctly, if you're looking at a 9 to 10 month build for this community, you've got 6 months from the time that you sign the contract to get your home sold. So then you've got a roughly 3 to 4 month rental period. Um, Now, per Indiana state law, with loan or a new buyer, assuming your home loan as an owner occupied home, you need to, you could rent it back for 59 days, but then after that, it becomes considered in the eyes of the state an investment property. So you could potentially stay in your home for an extra 2 months and rent it back from your new buyer if you're able to negotiate that as a seller. And then after that, that's when you would need to look into short-term solutions, or maybe you'll get lucky and Fischer Homes gets done early with the summer build season. Um, okay, well, just to close, I mean, we're kind of up on that 30 minutes. Is there any other closing remarks, or what's the best way for people to get in contact with you?
I think the best way for people to get in contact with me is through Jessica. So reach out to Jessica, give her a call, text, email, if you are interested in not only Greenwood, but any Fisher community. She can help kind of direct you what might be a best fit. And then we can take a look at some floor plans, some lots, and find what's best for them.
I love it. That's a great answer. I didn't ask her to say that, guys. But yeah, you always want to go through your realtor as a buyer if you're going to have representation through the new build process, because a lot of builders require that partnership where you and the realtor make that interest together. And especially if you are interested in a new community, sometimes you can overshare information that's I mean, no offense to the builder representative, but they work for the builder. And so I really coach clients on how we navigate that conversation. Again, it is a partnership between the realtor and the new build representative. We want to make sure that this is the right fit for you, especially if you're working with a certain budget and have a certain expectation with amenities that in your home, that we find the right product for you. And sometimes that's one builder and sometimes it's another builder. But the realtor is the place to start. And then we can give you all of the options and then go from there. So, um, and then also too, we can do virtual consultations. So you don't have to leave your home, especially if you've got kids or a lot going on in your work schedule. I'm happy to find a time that works for you and we can kind of go over everything online, make our decision of our strategy, and then go very strategically and sit in person and walk through these models and, find the right fit. So thank you so much, Alyssa, for your time. And is there anything else you want to leave our audience with?
I don't think so. Thank you for having me.
Sure. Are you guys having like a grand opening party celebration or anything like that?
We're not. This community's been a long time coming, so I think they're ready to just rock and roll with this thing. We're going to be putting a trailer out there on the property to be able to start taking appointments before we actually get a model built. So if you see a funky looking trailer on the property, that's us.
You have to like jazz it up with balloons and stuff.
Exactly. Yes, we're gonna have to do something.
At least it won't be too cold for much longer. Well, I mean, it's Indiana, so we could be cold into April, but
Fingers crossed. We'll have to see on that one.
yeah. Okay. Well, thank you everyone for tuning in. Please comment below if you found this video valuable. If there's other new construction sites that you're interested in learning more about, please let us know. We want to make this series as valuable for you as possible. And Alyssa, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Jessica, for having me.
My pleasure.